In Search of the STEM podcast. Here with me is Adam Kelly. You might be familiar with his name because he won the award to come to EUCYS at Intel ISEF this year, and also another award as well.
So I won the Best of Category in System Software, and I won the Dudley S. Herschbach Award to go to SIYSS in the Nobel Prize ceremony in Sweden.
Oh my God, that's awesome! Give me a high five. I've been there last year.
Oh.
So are you waiting for it?
Yeah, it's very soon. I had to make a poster and a video, and it took a while. But yeah, no, I'm very excited, so it should be good.
Yes, absolutely. It will be an amazing experience, and you get the whole tour like ISEF, EUCYS, and SciFest. So it's been a pretty busy year for you, right?
Yeah, so school has been somewhat put to the side, but
well, you gotta do what you gotta do, and well, this year, especially when you're in high school, you really gotta focus on research because that's when you gain new experiences, and it will help you further along. But okay, I want to hear about your project because if you receive Best of Category, this must be a good one.
Yeah, so my project is about quantum computing. So when you talk about the very, very small scales and you introduce quantum mechanics, a few years ago some guys had an idea to use these principles to do computation. And since then there's been a lot of work gone into the development of this field, and a very important aspect of that is simulation. So what my project looks at is trying to simulate quantum computers as effectively as possible. So trying to make sure it's low on memory, does it quickly, and then can actually simulate as much stuff as is possible. So as overall what my project does, it means you can simulate things faster than existing approaches to simulation.
Okay, sounds very interesting. So you heard the elevator talk, right? Mm-hmm. So what's your main vision of your project is working and improving quantum computers. So what were your experimental settings? You had the basic idea, but how did it move along further?
Yeah, so it's primarily a software project given that it's simulation. So I initially began with a type of simulation called state vector simulation, and by just taking textbook definitions, putting them straight into Python, it was about 100 lines of code. It was very inefficient, but it did work, and that's where I sort of got interested in quantum computing. I put it onto Hacker News. I got about 600 stars on GitHub, a few articles. A lot of people were quite interested. And then I sort of put it to the side. I got into a few other things, and then I came to science fair season. I was trying to think back through all the different things I was interested in, and I sort of thought, okay, well, I did this little bit of work on this very, very basic simulation. I wonder what the current research is like, and I had sort of seen that GPUs were being used quite heavily in machine learning to improve the training of neural networks and those sorts of tasks because they're just very good at just brute force crunching of numbers. So I sort of wondered, could that be used in quantum computing? And could I use a GPU to improve my very bad simulation? So that was sort of where my very first sort of title of my project. It was hardware acceleration for simulating quantum computers. So I read through lots of literature. I didn't even have a GPU at the time, so I was renting Amazon virtual machines with GPUs by the minute, and it was very stressful. But I did eventually figure out how to do it, and then how to avoid all things like race conditions and memory management and trying to reduce the amount of cloning of memory. So I did eventually come up with an approach for doing GPU simulation, and the methods were quite good. So that was my very first science fair, and that was sort of the regional level. So I entered that, and then over the summer between then and the national, I then tried to branch it out more. I implemented my algorithms for distributed systems, so like when you have loads of different nodes and then you have to try and reduce the amount of communication between them because that becomes the bottleneck. And so that was my project for one fair that I went to, which is called SciFest, and so I won that nationally, and I ended up going to ISEF with that prize. And in between then, so I'm from Ireland, just to say, so Ireland has two national fairs. There is SciFest and there's the BT Young Scientist. So I'd also heard, so if you win the Young Scientist, you can't enter SciFest, but if you win SciFest, you still can enter the Young Scientist. So I wanted to do both, but I didn't want to do the exact same thing. So I tried to see how I could expand my work. So I sent a few emails to a few different university lecturers and sort of begged for a few phone calls and some advice. And I got sent a good list of papers to read, and I started to find out that there was other types of simulation that could be done. And so I sort of I wonder if there is a way that I can take in an arbitrary sort of set of instructions for a quantum computer, and then could I process that in the most efficient way possible, and then simulate it efficiently, and then output it without the user's input. So that was sort of the guiding idea under my Young Scientist project, and then what I sort of brought to ISEF and EUCYS. So what it is now in slightly more detail is that you give the software a quantum circuit, so that's given in a textual format. It then parses that. It'll then look at the different properties of the circuit, and then it looks at all the different simulation methods. It parameterizes sort of the runtime and the memory, tries to figure out which will be the most efficient, and then once it selects a type of simulation, it'll then go and optimize the actual instructions it's given to be suited for that architecture. And then that all ends up being about, well, it's very hard to say exactly how fast because it depends on what you're simulating, but between 20 and 150 times faster.
Wow, numbers don't lie, and it's really interesting how you move into from that project idea. And I know that for young scientists, you sometimes have to knock on those doors to receive that scientific help, because if you don't go for it, it will not be just fall from the sky into your hands. So you gotta put in the hard work. And also, what you've been doing is a very crucial field of science, and it's applied sciences, if we can say that.
Yeah, I would agree.
So, in terms of application, quantum computers, for those who are not familiar with the concept, where could be used, where are they implemented in real life?
Yeah, so for actual uses of quantum computers, we're at the very, very early stages of development. So there's nothing that a quantum computer can do that your phone can't do 10 times better. But that doesn't mean that people aren't still trying to come up with how it will be used. So there's sort of two main categories of problems that are well suited to the current sort of algorithms that they have for quantum computers. They would be things like solving optimization problems, and then solving specific mathematical problems which lead to more interesting applications. So to give an example, optimization problems is very, very general, and if you can write a problem in terms of a slightly more technical version, which is finding eigenvalues, then you can apply something like called VQE, variational quantum eigensolver, and then that uses a quantum computer to vary the different parameters and try to minimize some property, whatever you want. And that can be used for things like traveling salesman problem, for finding bond lengths and the amount of energy in molecules and chemistry. So they're quite the headline applications. And then in terms of sort of quantum first algorithms, if you want to call them that, you have things like factoring, which is based on period finding. That's a sort of mathematical problem. And then things like Grover's algorithm for search. So there is algorithms. They're not going to do anything very fancy, but it's quite an interesting field because there is so much going on.
Absolutely, and for the advancement of science, it's like more specific fields, and it goes into detail and really helps and eases the lives of scientists, which is, can we say that?
When most of the quantum computers at the moment have to be stored in very, very specific conditions. Yeah. So really, really cold, really like no noise, like you can't be banging off it. Like it's not like a computer at home.
It's like a huge massive box. Yeah, I saw pictures.
And the chips are like that small, and then the fridge is like 1,000 times bigger. So most of them you can access at the moment is done through the cloud. So you can access IBM's quantum computer over the internet, and the same with one by Rigetti. But there's queues, there's wait times. Yeah. So the way you would need simulation is so that maybe you would try a small scale version of your algorithm. You would test it, debug it, figure out if your code works, and then you would scale it up on a quantum computer. And then also in quantum computing, things are somewhat probabilistic. But those probabilities, or the complex numbers representing those probabilities, they can't be accessed directly. All you can do is keep running your quantum computer and sort of see what the distribution looks like. Whereas when you have a simulation, you can see what those complex numbers are. And that's something that you couldn't even do if you had a quantum computer. So that's why it's sort of an important thing to do. And then obviously making it faster and more memory efficient means you can do bigger simulations. But even for small scale simulations, things like the variational quantum eigensolver, the current applications, like you can simulate two hydrogen atoms, for example, and that takes 2 or 3 qubits, but you need to run it 600 or 1,000 times. So if you can even have a little increase in speed for each one, it then multiplies and compounds, and especially when you move up. So.
And especially that's why you've done the runtime optimization and all those aspects to increase speed and increase the rate of processing the information. Yeah. Absolutely. So you've entered ISEF and now EUCYS. What do you most enjoy about these scientific championships, and we can say conferences, because we get to know a lot of projects as well?
Yeah, definitely the people. It's a little bit cliche, but like I've made so many friends through science fairs and through conferences as well that I still talk to. So definitely the people. And then also learning about other areas of science. Like I don't do any biology, but I've learned about some fields of research that I never would have heard of before, because it's not my sort of area, which is nice.
Yeah, it's like you're expanding your horizons, and if anyone is from the ISEF gang is watching, shout out to you. You have, I think, like almost 150 projects from different fields, as you mentioned, and it's just cool to hear about their work as well. And when I'm doing this podcast, I'm really interested to showing the person beyond the project board. Question I ask sometimes, because we all have some people in our lives, or it could be like a scientist living in the past, or anyone, an influential person who you look up to. So who is that in your case?
It's hard to pick one. It would sort of depend on the field. So like in physics, for example, Richard Feynman, it's the very sort of canonical.
Feynman, that's it, okay.
Yeah, because like I've read some of his books, and I bought one of my friends all the Feynman lecture books for his birthday, and really great explainer, and his work is very interesting as well. And then in other fields it would be slightly different. So I read a few books from, like, for example, G.H. Hardy, who's a mathematician from Cambridge, which is a very sort of inspiring story, because there's a lot of history there, especially with the mathematician Ramanujan, but also his work is very interesting as well, and he has a really good number theory book. So yeah, it's hard to
get quite complex and imaginary, right?
Yeah, but for science,
because of the complex imaginary numbers, or just
well, Hardy worked on a lot of stuff with the Riemann zeta function as well, but he didn't solve the big problem. So
all right, but it's still an interesting thing to read. So we've got a book recommendations as well. So closing up, I want to ask you that, of course, we are in Sofia, Bulgaria, which is like in a Mediterranean part, so the weather is a bit warmer than in Ireland it is right now. So what do you enjoy about being here?
Well, we got to see Sofia yesterday. We have this student organizers here, so they brought us around. It's a lot nicer than I thought it would be. Like, there's a lot of sort of very beautiful, like, big buildings, and we saw some nice libraries, and I didn't really know what to expect, because I never thought I'd end up going to Bulgaria, because it's just never somewhere I've thought of going, and there's not even any direct flights from Ireland. But like, it's a lot warmer than I thought. That's the most striking. Like, I brought a lot of thick clothes, but it's very warm.
It's kind of like a big temperature difference between night and day, so you were prepared for the nighttime, like say. So yeah, it's full of culture and history, just as you mentioned, a lot of libraries and also churches as well. So it's a great place of organization. Thank you for giving me this interview, and I hope your judging went great.
I hope it did too.
Yes, well, we'll figure it out tomorrow. And thank you for tuning in. You can access us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and also on YouTube as well if you want to get the visuals. Hey guys, I'm tuning in from home. I just wanted to let you guys know that Adam won first prize of 7,000 euros at EUCYS this year. I already said this to him personally, but now in front of a larger audience as well. Congratulations!